At the edge of a wide plain, surrounded by acacia trees and red earth that glowed under the golden sun, there stood a village that seemed as old as the winds themselves. Its huts were made of mud and thatch, their roofs rounded like the backs of great tortoises, clustered together in circles as if huddling for warmth against the mysteries of the world. Narrow paths of dust wound between the homes, leading to the central square where every great story of the people began and ended. This was not just a place where men and women lived, but a heartbeat of tradition, a world where the past walked hand in hand with the present. The people here believed that their ancestors watched closely, not from distant heavens but from the rustling leaves, from the flames of their fires, and most powerfully from the beating of the drums. The village lived for its rituals. Every sunrise was greeted with song, every harvest marked with dances, and every birth accompanied by chants that spoke of hope and destiny. Children learned to clap to the rhythms before they could even walk, and young men grew proud calluses on their palms from years of drumming during ceremonies. To them, music was not entertainment, it was a bridge between worlds. It carried the voices of ancestors, it weighed the worth of truth and lies, and during the grand annual festival, it was said that the drums could speak directly to the soul of the village. On that night, the sound could reveal the fate of children, the secrets of elders, or the hidden sins of those who thought they were safe. People feared the drums, yet they gathered eagerly every year to hear what they might reveal. Among these villagers lived a girl who never quite belonged. Her name was whispered rather than spoken, her presence noticed only when it needed to be mocked. She grew up in a poor household on the outskirts of the village, where the huts leaned crookedly and the smoke from cooking fires always seemed thinner, as if the food inside was too little to feed the flames. While other children wore bright cloth at festivals, she wore patched-up rags. While they carried baskets of food to share, she stood empty-handed, her eyes lowered to hide her shame. No one offered her kindness except for her mother, who guarded her fiercely yet with a silence that only deepened the questions surrounding her. From her earliest days, the girl had been marked as different. Her skin carried a shade that some said was unlike her mother's or anyone else in the family. Her eyes seemed too sharp, her gaze unsettling to those who looked too long. She bore herself with a strange quiet dignity, even when mocked, and this unsettled the villagers even more. Children were told not to play with her. Mothers drew their daughters away when she passed by, muttering under their breath. Yet behind all this cruelty, there lingered something darker, gossip that never dared rise above a whisper. Some said her birth was cursed. Others claimed her father was not from the village, that he was a man of power whose bloodline had to be hidden to avoid scandal. Still others muttered that she was the child of the spirits, born on a night when the sky tore open with thunder. But none of these tales were spoken in her presence. They belonged only to shadows and gossiping tongues. For the girl, life was a series of questions that no one answered. Whenever she asked her mother about her father, the woman's face would harden, and she would turn away, muttering only that some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. The girl learned to carry her loneliness like a cloak, her silence like armor. Yet deep in her chest she carried a fire, a longing to know, to belong, to find the part of herself that the world seemed so desperate to hide. Every year as the festival approached, her heart would tighten. The drums would soon be heard again, and though the villagers feared them, she felt drawn to their rhythm as if they beat for her alone. She remembered sitting on the edge of the square as a child, watching the dancers whirl around the sacred drums, her feet itching to join them though she dared not step forward. The old drummers would strike the skins with a power that shook the earth, and she would feel every beat inside her bones. She did not understand why, but sometimes it felt as if the drums were calling her name, even when no one else would. The elders always spoke of the drums with reverence, reminding the people that they were not mere instruments but vessels of truth. The drums do not lie, they would say. They beat with the voice of the ancestors, and the ancestors cannot be deceived. Over time, villagers began to believe that secrets could never last forever, because the drums would one day uncover them. Some men tried to keep their sins hidden, only to see them revealed in the strange rhythms played during the festival. Some women thought they could carry secrets to the grave, but the drums would speak them aloud for all to hear. That was the power everyone both revered and feared. And so, as the new festival drew near, tension rippled through the village like the wind before a storm. The people prepared with painted faces and colorful cloth, cooking feasts and rehearsing dances, yet beneath their celebration there was unease. For they sensed that this year the drums would not simply bless their harvest or call forth joy, they would unearth something long buried. The girl too felt it. She watched the preparations with quiet eyes, her heart beating in rhythm with a sound that had not yet begun. Deep within her, she knew that secrets could be buried under dust, hidden behind silence, but they could not be buried forever. The elders said the ancestors were restless. The women whispered of dreams filled with shadows. And as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in red and gold, the girl walked alone past the square and felt the air shiver around her. She did not yet know it, but destiny was moving closer with every beat of silence. The festival drums would soon awaken, and when they spoke, no lie would survive. Some secrets, after all, cannot be buried when the drums begin to speak. Her earliest memories were of silence. Not the comforting silence of dawn when birds had not yet begun to sing, nor the restful hush of night when fires dwindled to embers. It was a silence heavy with things unsaid, with questions pushed aside, with a mother who loved fiercely but spoke too little. She would tug at her mother's cloth, asking why other children had fathers who lifted them high in the air, why their names were spoken proudly in the square, while hers was left to drift like a leaf on water. Her mother would only tighten her grip on the basket she carried or stir the pot with sudden force and whisper, "Some answers are not safe, my child." Then she would turn away, her face hardening like stone, and the girl would learn again that there were doors in her life she could not open. Her household was not one of warmth and laughter. Her mother, though kind in small gestures, was not enough to shield her from the others with whom they lived. The girl's stepfamily, the kin who shared the hut, saw her as little more than an intruder. Her step-aunt, a woman with sharp eyes and a tongue sharper still, never let her forget that she was different. "Unwanted," she would mutter, loud enough for the child to hear. "A mouth we did not ask for. A shadow that lingers where it should not." The woman's sons followed her example, mocking the girl for her ragged clothes, for the way her eyes seemed to burn brighter than the rest, for the silence she carried like a shield. They would hide her meager food, push her into the dirt, and laugh as she struggled. And though her mother tried to protect her, she too lived under the weight of dependency, unable to fight every battle for a daughter whose very existence brought whispered shame. The girl bore it all in silence, but silence did not mean she felt nothing. Each insult left scars on her heart, each denial carved deeper into her spirit. She knew she was not like the others, not because she wished it but because the world insisted on reminding her. She walked with her head bowed, yet within her she dreamed of walking tall. She dreamed of a day when the village would look at her not with scorn but with recognition, when her name would be spoken without mockery. She dreamed of belonging, though she had never known what that truly felt like. At night, when the stepfamily's laughter turned to snores, she would slip outside and stare at the stars. The sky was the only place that seemed vast enough to hold her questions. She wondered if her father was out there somewhere, perhaps looking up at the same stars, perhaps thinking of her. She had been told nothing of him, not even his name. The villagers' gossip was her only clue, but it was twisted and fragmented, designed to wound rather than to reveal. Some said he was a wanderer who had abandoned her mother. Others whispered that he was a forbidden man, someone whose union with her mother had brought disgrace. And yet, there were hints in the way her mother carried herself, dignified even in poverty, proud even in silence, that suggested the truth was far more complicated. The elders, who sat in the council beneath the shade of the great Irako tree, were guardians of the village's traditions. They were the keepers of order, the ones who decided which unions were blessed, which children were honored, which families held power. To them, appearances were as important as truth, sometimes more so. A scandal could weaken their authority, could shake the village's belief in their wisdom. And so, if the girl's birth carried with it a shadow of shame, if her father was indeed someone of status who should not have touched her mother, then burying the truth was easier than facing it. They would look at her from time to time, their eyes narrowing as if to measure how much she might know. Then they would turn away, speaking of her as if she were invisible. Their silence was not ignorance, it was strategy. Among the people, speculation thrived like weeds. The girl would hear fragments when she passed. "Look at her eyes, too sharp, too proud. That is no ordinary child." Another voice would hush the first, warning against speaking too loudly. Rumor suggested that her father might have been a warrior of great renown, one who had died in battle and left behind only shame for breaking a forbidden oath. Others whispered that he was a priest, a man sworn to the gods who had broken his vows in secret. The boldest claim of all, though spoken only in whispers at night, was that her father was of the chief's own bloodline, that the girl was kin to power itself, but hidden away because her birth was not sanctioned by tradition. The girl herself did not know what to believe. She carried these whispers like stolen treasures, clutching them in her heart, imagining different versions of herself. Sometimes she pictured her father as a great warrior with scars and honor, who would have lifted her high on his shoulders had he lived. Sometimes she thought of him as a priest who had loved her mother too much to obey the rules of the gods. And sometimes, when she dared to dream the most dangerous dream of all, she imagined herself as a daughter of royalty, born not for shame but for destiny. Yet the harshness of her life made such dreams feel like lies she told herself to survive. Day after day she rose before dawn to fetch water while others still slept. She worked the fields longer than anyone else, only to be rewarded with scraps of food. She stitched together old cloth to make something that resembled a dress, while her step-siblings wore new garments. She endured laughter when her hair grew untamed, when her stomach growled too loudly, when her silence seemed too strange. Her life was one long reminder that she did not belong. But even as she suffered, she carried within her something that could not be crushed. It was not arrogance nor defiance, it was the quiet strength of someone who had endured more than her years should have allowed. And this strength, though hidden, frightened those who tormented her. They could call her unwanted, they could try to strip her of dignity, but deep down they knew there was something about her they could not touch. Perhaps it was the blood that flowed in her veins, perhaps it was the destiny waiting in the shadows. The chief and elders did not speak of it, but they too felt the unease. A child born under secrecy, carrying whispers of forbidden lineage, was a danger to the fragile order they maintained. Better to let her remain unseen, better to let the villagers scorn her into silence, better to keep the truth buried beneath shame. For if the truth came out, if the drums ever spoke her story, the village would never be the same again. And so the girl grew, caught between silence and whispers, between dreams of recognition and the heavy hand of rejection. Her childhood was not a place of safety but a battlefield where her very existence was questioned. Yet even as she bent under the weight of it all, she never broke. Deep in her heart, she knew the day would come when answers would rise from the earth like the first shoots after rain. She did not know when or how, but she believed, because she had to, that the truth could not stay hidden forever. The season of the festival arrived with the swelling of the river and the ripening of millet, and with it came a stirring in the village that touched every home, every courtyard, every heart. From dawn until the shadows of dusk, preparations filled the air like the hum of bees. Women bent over great clay pots, stirring stews rich with spices, their arms gleaming with sweat as fragrant steam rose to the skies. Smoke drifted lazily from cooking fires, carrying with it the promise of roasted yam, tender goat meat, and sweet cakes of honey. Children chased each other between the huts, their faces already smeared with bright paint stolen from the bowls of their mothers, laughing as they pretended to be the dancers they would soon watch. Men cut long branches to build stands for the spectators, their voices rising in work songs that echoed through the fields. The village itself seemed to transform. Bright cloths were hung at doorways, fluttering in the wind like banners of celebration. Women dyed new garments in vats of indigo and crimson, spreading them to dry in the sun until the square became a tapestry of color. Even the air carried the weight of anticipation. The distant sound of drums, soft at first, began days before the festival, as if the drummers themselves were summoning the spirits early. At night, the rhythms grew louder, joined by flutes and rattles, until the entire village pulsed with a heartbeat not its own. The girl watched it all with wide eyes as she had every year before. From the corner of the square or the edge of a path, she drank in the colors, the laughter, the music, though she was never truly a part of it. Other children were dressed in new clothes, their bodies painted with spirals of red clay and white chalk that shimmered under the sun. Her own garments were patched together from old cloth, the colors faded, the stitching uneven. Where others painted their faces in patterns that told stories of lineage and honor, her skin remained bare, for no one had taken the time to mark her. Yet still she came, drawn as surely as a moth to fire, her heart beating with the rhythms that already filled the air. The festival was no ordinary gathering. It was the pinnacle of their year, the moment when the village sought the blessings of the ancestors. And at the heart of it all were the sacred drums. Kept in a shrine for most of the year, covered with hides and guarded by chosen families, the drums were said to contain the voices of those who had come before. They were not simply carved wood and animal skin, but living vessels of spirit. When played during the festival, they did more than make music, they revealed truths. The people believed that the ancestors could not be deceived, that through the drums they could expose lies, guide the people, and sometimes even declare destinies. For this reason, everyone, even the most powerful elders, approached the drums with both reverence and fear. As the sun sank low on the eve of the festival, the square was transformed into a place of fire and light. Torches lined the circle, flames leaping toward the sky. Mats were spread out for feasting, gourds of palm wine placed at the ready. Drummers sat cross-legged near the shrine, their hands poised over the skins, their bodies already swaying to rhythms only they could hear. Dancers painted from head to toe began to move in slow, spiraling steps, their anklets of shells and beads shaking with each beat. The entire village gathered, voices rising in anticipation, faces glowing with the heat of firelight and expectation. The girl lingered on the outskirts as always. She felt the pull of the drums like a tide pulling at her chest, urging her to step closer, to join the circle, to be part of the rhythm. Yet she dared not. Whenever she edged forward, eyes would fall on her, sharp and warning, as if her very presence threatened to contaminate the sacredness of the night. Mothers pulled their children away, muttering that she brought misfortune. Young men smirked and whispered insults behind their palms. Still she did not leave. Something stronger than fear held her there. She could not tear herself away, not when the air seemed to hum with a promise that the night would not be like any other. The elders entered the square with measured steps, their cloaks of animal skin draped over their shoulders, staffs in hand. Their faces were painted not for beauty but for power, with symbols drawn in white chalk across their brows and cheeks. They took their place before the shrine, gazing at the drums as though waiting for them to breathe. The chatter of the villagers died down to a hush. Even the children fell silent, their eyes wide. It was the eldest among them, his beard silvered and his back bent yet his voice strong, who raised his staff and spoke. "Tonight," he said, "we call upon the ancestors as we have done since the first fire was lit in this place. Tonight we dance, we feast, we celebrate, but above all we listen. The drums will speak as they always do, and we must be ready to hear." His voice trembled not with weakness but with weight, as if he carried a burden larger than himself. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, lingering just a moment too long on the girl at the edge of the square. She felt the weight of it, sharp and piercing, as though he knew she should not even be there. Then he looked away and the moment passed, yet not without planting a seed of unease in her heart. Another elder, a woman with lines of age etched deeply into her face, stepped forward. Her eyes glowed in the torchlight as she lifted her hands. "This year is not like others," she declared, her voice carrying across the square. "This year the ancestors have stirred. They have whispered in dreams, they have shaken the leaves, they have troubled the waters. They will not remain silent tonight. What has been hidden will be revealed. What has been buried will rise. The drums will not lie." A ripple went through the crowd. Some gasped, some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. It was rare for the elders to speak so openly of unrest in the spirit world. The villagers whispered to each other, eyes darting toward their neighbors, wondering whose secrets might fall under the judgment of the drums. Fear and excitement blended in the air, a tension so thick it seemed to press against the skin. The girl's breath caught in her throat. The word struck her like a secret bell ringing in her chest. What has been hidden will be revealed. She did not know why, but the phrase clung to her, making her heart pound harder with every beat of the distant drums. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps the night was not only for the village but for her. The drummers raised their hands, poised to strike. The flames leapt higher, casting the faces of the villagers in gold and shadow. The dancers circled faster, shells clattering with each step. Silence fell for a heartbeat, heavy and expectant, before the first beat rang out like thunder splitting the night. The festival had begun, and with it, the promise that the drums would soon speak louder than lies. The festival reached its height as the night deepened, the firelight flickering against the dark sky and the smoke rising in twisting trails as if carrying the prayers of the people into the heavens. The square pulsed with movement. Dancers leapt and spun, their bodies gleaming with oil, their painted faces fierce and beautiful. Drums pounded in layered rhythms, fast and slow, weaving into one another like threads of a single tapestry. Each beat reverberated through the earth, through the bones of the villagers, through the very air they breathed. It was as though the ancestors themselves were walking among them, their footsteps echoing in the music. At first, everything seemed as it had in years past. Familiar rhythms, practiced dances, the predictable swell of voices joining in chants. But then something shifted. One of the sacred drummers, his eyes closed, his body swaying in trance, struck the hide with an unfamiliar pattern. The rhythm was uneven, broken at first, then grew into something strong, insistent, and strange. It cut through the circle like a voice interrupting a conversation, a tone that did not belong yet demanded to be heard. The other drummers faltered for a breath, surprised, then followed unwillingly, their hands moving as though guided by a force beyond themselves. The sound swelled until it no longer felt like music, it felt like a summons. The villagers stiffened. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The drums are restless," someone whispered. "They are not playing as they should." Old women clutched their necklaces of cowrie shells, muttering prayers to keep misfortune away. Men exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter from earlier dying in their throats. Even the children, usually too caught up in the excitement to notice anything strange, stood still, wide-eyed as the drums grew louder, their rhythm unfamiliar yet strangely compelling. The girl stood at the margins, her chest tightening with every beat. She felt the sound enter her body, coursing through her blood, making her feet itch as though they wanted to move on their own. It was not just sound, it was recognition, a voice calling to her from a place she could not name. Against her will, her body leaned forward, step by hesitant step, until she found herself closer to the circle of firelight. The drummers struck harder, their hands moving faster, their faces shining with sweat. The strange rhythm grew even louder, as though her very presence was feeding it. Eyes turned toward her. She felt the weight of their gazes pressing against her skin, prickling like heat. Murmurs spread, sharper now, no longer hidden. "Why do the drums beat like this when she comes near? It is her, they are calling her. What does it mean?" Some voices carried awe, others suspicion, others outright fear. The girl's heart raced, but she could not turn back. It was as though invisible hands pulled her toward the circle, toward the rhythm that felt like it had been waiting for her all along. The elders exchanged glances, their faces tight with alarm. This was not what they had planned, not what they had prayed for. One of them rose abruptly, raising his staff, and shouted over the music, "Silence! Stop the drums." But the drummers did not stop. Their eyes were glazed, their bodies trembling as though possessed, their hands striking faster and faster. Sweat poured down their faces, yet they did not falter. The elders' command was swallowed by the unrelenting rhythm, and the villagers shrank back, frightened by what they were witnessing. Another elder rushed forward, grasping one of the drummers by the arm, but the man's body jerked violently as though rejecting the touch. His hands continued to move, beating the strange rhythm with even greater force. The elder stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. "It is not them," he gasped. "It is the ancestors. The ancestors are speaking." The girl froze, the firelight painting her face in flickering gold. Her heart pounded in time with the rhythm, so perfectly aligned that she felt she might burst apart if it grew any louder. Around her, villagers whispered in awe and fear, "The drums are speaking to her. What truth are they trying to tell us? Why now?" Faces turned pale as memories stirred, memories long buried, spoken only in hushed tones in the dead of night. An old woman clutched her shawl and whispered, "I remember the night of her birth." Another added, trembling, "The storm was fierce, the sky cracked with thunder." The midwife swore a shadow passed over the hut before she cried out. A third voice, low and urgent, said, "And do you not recall the whispers? That her father was not the man her mother claimed, that she was born of forbidden love." The rhythm grew louder, sharper, like a hammer striking iron. Each beat seemed to force truth to the surface. An elder, his face pale with sweat, muttered to the others, "We buried this. We swore it would never be spoken." But the drums did not heed their oaths. They beat on, merciless, carrying voices of the past into the present. Flashbacks flickered in the villagers' minds as though conjured by the rhythm itself. They saw again the young woman, her mother, arriving late at night, her belly heavy with child, her eyes wide with fear. They remembered how she had refused to speak of the father, how she had hidden away from prying eyes. They remembered the rumors that swirled, that she had been seen near the shrine where no woman should go, that she had spoken too often with a warrior who belonged to another's promise, that she had lingered too close to the chief's compound. Each memory collided with the next, weaving a tapestry of suspicion that had never been resolved. And then there were those who remembered the prophecy. Long ago, it was said that a child would be born under thunder and fire, carrying both shame and greatness, a child who would rise when the drums spoke out of rhythm. Few had taken it seriously, prophecies were common in whispers but rare in truth. Yet now, as the strange beat echoed through the night, the words came rushing back with chilling clarity. "When the drums grow restless, a hidden child shall be revealed, and the village will be changed forever." The villagers turned toward the girl, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. Could she be the one? Could this unwanted child, mocked and cast aside, be the bearer of a destiny they had tried to smother? Her presence seemed to feed the drums, each step she took making the rhythm swell until it filled every corner of the square, until it seemed the earth itself was beating with her name. The elders tried again, their voices breaking as they cried for the drummers to stop, for the ancestors to rest, but it was futile. The rhythm would not be silenced. The truth, long buried under shame and secrecy, had found its voice, and it spoke not with words but with sound. The girl stood trembling at the edge of the firelight, the center of every gaze, as though the entire village had been waiting for this moment, this revelation, her entire life. The drums called her, louder and louder, until there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. The secrets of her birth were about to rise, unstoppable as the tide. The fire blazed higher, casting sparks into the night sky as though the ancestors themselves had gathered to watch. The drummers' hands moved faster, their bodies trembling, eyes rolled back into a trance so deep they seemed no longer of this world. Their mouths opened, and from them came a chant, not in the language of daily speech but in the old tongue, the sacred words only used in ritual and prophecy. Their voices wove into the rhythm of the drums, each syllable striking as heavily as a drumbeat itself. The crowd shivered, every hair rising as if invisible hands had brushed across their skin. The chant grew louder, weaving fragments of truth that the villagers could barely comprehend. Daughter of blood, born in thunder, hidden from eyes, bearer of the chief's line. The words fell like stones in a still pond, each one sending ripples of shock across the assembly. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Men who had once scoffed at the girl looked at her with unease. Women who had mocked her behind their palms felt their throats tighten with shame. The air was so heavy it seemed to press against the lungs, forcing silence upon everyone except the drummers and the ancient voice flowing through them. One elder tried to rise, shaking his staff to quiet the madness. "No more. These are forbidden words," he cried, but his voice broke in the firelit air. None listened. Even he trembled, for he knew in his bones that the drums did not lie. Their rhythm carried the truth of centuries, and no command from a mortal tongue could still it. The girl stood frozen, her heart hammering as though it too had become a drum. Her ears rang with the chant, each word slamming into her soul. Daughter of blood, born in thunder, hidden from eyes, bearer of the chief's line. She wanted to deny it, to shake her head, but the rhythm dug deep inside her, awakening something that had always lain dormant. She remembered flashes she had never understood before, the way her mother wept silently when others taunted her, the strange respect some villagers showed her when they thought no one was watching, the hushed way elders would stop talking when she entered a room. It all pressed down on her at once, too heavy to contain. The crowd gasped as the chanting reached its peak. The drums thundered like storms rolling across the earth, until their rhythm matched the trembling of the girl's own breath. And then, from somewhere behind her, a voice broke the silence between beats. A raw, desperate voice. Her mother. The woman stumbled forward, her eyes glistening in the firelight, her body shaking with sobs she had held back for years. "Enough," she cried. "Enough hiding, enough silence. It is true." Her voice cracked as she fell to her knees, clutching the ground as if it could swallow her shame. "She carries royal blood. She is the daughter of the chief, born of love that was forbidden, born in a night of thunder when the heavens themselves bore witness." Gasps tore through the crowd like wind rushing through dry leaves. People turned to one another, their faces masks of disbelief and fear. Some recoiled, others bowed their heads in shame. Men who had mocked her as worthless now stared at the ground, unable to meet her eyes. Women who had ridiculed her clothes and silence bit their lips until they bled. Children who had laughed at her in the dust clung to their mothers, suddenly unsure if their teasing might have cursed them. The girl's breath came shallow, her body trembling. She stared at her mother, the words echoing in her skull. Daughter of the chief. She had imagined 1,000 possibilities about her birth, but never this. She had dreamed of being acknowledged, of belonging, of not being the outsider whispered about behind closed doors. But this truth, this glory, it was beyond imagining. She had been humiliated, beaten down, made to feel like dust beneath the sandals of others. And now, before the entire village, the drums had lifted her name higher than anyone could have dreamed. Her mother's sobs shook the earth as she crawled closer, reaching out to touch her daughter's feet. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice breaking like dry wood. "I wanted to protect you. If they knew, they would have taken you from me, or worse, silenced you before you could breathe your destiny. I thought silence was safety. But the drums cannot be deceived." The villagers bowed their heads, shame flooding their faces. The same tongues that had spit cruelty now fell silent. One by one they lowered themselves, some kneeling, some touching their foreheads to the earth, not daring to look upon the girl they had despised. It was as if the truth itself demanded reverence and none could resist it. The girl swayed where she stood, her heart burning, her mind a storm of disbelief and awe. She wanted to speak, to shout, to weep, but no words came. Instead, she raised her head slowly and her eyes caught the firelight. In that moment, her face seemed to glow with something otherworldly, something that silenced even the murmurs of doubt still lingering in the shadows. She had not asked for this. She had not dreamed of glory. But now it stood before her, undeniable, carved into the night by the drums of her ancestors. The drummers, still lost in their trance, struck the hides one final time. The sound thundered across the square, rolling into the forest, echoing down the hillsides, a single beat that felt like the heartbeat of the world itself. Then silence fell. And in that silence came the final whisper, rising from the drums like smoke, carried in the breath of the night wind: "The truth cannot be buried." The words sank deep into every soul present. Some wept openly. Others shuddered. A few clasped their hands in prayer. But none could deny what they had heard, what they had seen. The truth had risen, undeniable, carried on the rhythm of the ancestors, and nothing would ever return to the way it had been before. The girl, once unwanted, now stood at the center of destiny. The drums had chosen her. The fire still burned, but softer now, its glow no longer wild and furious but steady, like a lamp lighting the path ahead. The girl stood tall, her body trembling not with fear but with something new, strength, dignity, and a weight of belonging she had never felt before. Around her, the villagers remained hushed, their faces tilted toward her, waiting. For the first time in her life, she was not on the margins of the gathering but at its very heart, and every eye followed her as she took her first step forward. The crowd parted as she moved, as though the earth itself demanded a path for her feet. People who had once thrown stones of words and scorn now stretched out their hands, trembling, hoping to touch the edge of her garment, the brush of her skin, anything that might link them to the child of destiny. She walked slowly, each step deliberate, her gaze steady, her back straight. No longer the girl mocked and rejected. She was something greater, something their whispers had never been able to erase. She was the truth that had risen from the shadows. Some villagers wept openly, their tears streaking painted faces. Men who had laughed at her in the marketplace now lowered themselves, bowing their heads to the dust. Women who had scolded their children for playing near her now guided those same children forward, urging them to bow, to honor her. And the children, eyes wide with awe, reached for her hand, as if sensing that she was no longer someone to be avoided but someone to be cherished. The elders stood in a solemn line, their staffs in hand, their faces drawn with unease. Pride warred with humility in their eyes. They had fought to keep this secret buried, but the drums had spoken, and even they, guardians of tradition, could not silence destiny. Slowly, one by one, they lowered their heads in reluctant bows. The gesture was small but powerful, a sign that even those who thought themselves keepers of truth had to yield before it. At the edge of the firelight, her mother still knelt, tears dampening the earth. The girl approached her, her footsteps quiet, and for a moment, silence spread again through the square. All eyes watched to see what she would do. Would she scorn the woman who had hidden her truth? Would she turn away as she had so often been turned away herself? She stopped before her mother, looking down at the bent figure, the shaking shoulders, the hands clawing into the dirt. Her own heart softened. The years of silence, of humiliation, of longing for belonging, had weighed heavily on her, but now she saw not only her own suffering but her mother's too. The woman had borne the burden of secrecy, of fear, of isolation, all for the sake of keeping her child alive. The girl knelt beside her, lifting her with gentle hands. "You carried me when no one else would," she whispered, her voice steady yet tender. "You hid the truth but you never abandoned me. I forgive you." Her mother wept harder, clutching her daughter close, relief breaking through her sorrow like dawn breaking the night. The crowd exhaled together, as though the air itself had been released from a heavy weight. For in that act of forgiveness, the girl had proven she was more than the child of prophecy. She was a heart strong enough to heal the wounds of both past and present. The drums began again, softly this time, a rhythm that carried no unrest but celebration. The dancers rose, circling her, their movements slow and reverent. The fire roared higher, its sparks rising like crowns into the sky. And then, as if guided by one spirit, the villagers began to chant her name. At first it was scattered, hesitant, but soon it grew layer upon layer, until the square echoed with her name, her story, her truth. Children clapped their hands in rhythm. Women swayed, ululating with joy. Men beat the earth with their palms. It was no longer the festival they had begun but something new entirely, a coronation born of drums, fire, and revelation. Where once she had been shame, now she was honor. Where once she had been mocked, now she was celebrated. Where once she had been forgotten, now she was unforgettable. She lifted her face to the night sky, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as though the ancestors themselves looked down in approval. For the first time she felt not only accepted but chosen, by the village, by the spirits, by destiny itself. The chants rose higher, carrying her name into the hills, into the trees, into the winds that would spread it beyond the borders of her home. The forgotten child had risen, and her story would never again be buried. No matter how many seasons pass, no matter how many lies are woven into silence, the truth cannot be buried forever. It waits, patient and unyielding, until the right moment comes, and then it finds a voice, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in storms, and sometimes in the steady thunder of drums that no hand can silence. That night, the village learned a lesson carved into the very heart of tradition. Mockery turns to shame and shame to reverence when the truth finally rises. They who had laughed at her bowed their heads. They who had cast her aside stretched out their hands to honor her. For no one truly knows the weight of another's story, and the child you scorn today may be the one destiny has chosen to carry tomorrow. The festival became her beginning, not her end. The drums had spoken, but the path they revealed was only the first step. Her name echoed in chants across the night, carried by wind and firelight, hinting that her journey was far from over. For if truth has risen once, what greater revelations might still lie ahead?